Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Blue Tron, back with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. So, in line with Friday's video in which I looked at an actually good deck archetype to see how it stacked up against other actually good decks, here I'm examining a similarly powerful strategy that I expect to become intensely meta in the coming weeks. That would be MINERVA LIGHTSWORN. Now, right now, to be honest, one of the only things keeping this deck down is the fact that Minerva is currently only available as really a prize card, so unless you have about $2,000 extra lying around to afford a copy, it's unlikely you're going to be playing this deck anytime soon. However, thanks to the magic of the internet, we can play this on YGO Pro for free. So let's jump into Deck Edit and I'll show you what I believe an optimal list would look like. So this is the list I ended up on. Now, you should be able to see almost instantly that there's some jankety shit going on in this deck, not the least of which is the fact that it's actually 40 cards. Now, Lightsworn presents one of the first good arguments in Yu-Gi-Oh! For playing more than 40 cards in your main deck. And I'm not talking 41, 42 like you occasionally see topping. I'm talking like a straight 50, 60 card deck. Now that has to do with a couple of unintuitive deck building reasons that are like percentage oriented and usually don't take the forefront of discussions about how skill manifests in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, these decisions matter a lot. Making sure that you can consistently, or at least a high percentage of the time, mill your wolves and felices instead of drawing them. Make sure that Garnet ends up in your deck and not in your hand. Same with Perform Mage Trick Clown. Making sure that your Pot of Desires isn't banishing more than one copy of Galaxy Soldier, making sure you always have fodder for your Fairy Tale Snows. These are all decisions that require you to play more cards in your main deck, but keep consistency about the same. However, I'm really greedy, and as a result I'm playing a 40 card deck, at least for the purposes of this video. Let me walk you through the card choices. So, the first thing you'll notice is that we're playing the Brilliant Fusion Engine alongside one Garnet and one Perform Mage Trick Clown because I believe in myself, and I know I'm not going to draw these cards. Which is something I pay for dearly in the actual games. 2 copies of Galaxy Soldier. Once again, really believing hard in myself here. I figure we have enough light monsters in order to make this consistent enough, and I really can't pass up the opportunity to play Cyber Dragon Infinity. 2 copies of Photon Thrasher, 2 copies of Goblinberg. These are good in different scenarios. Photon Thrasher has the added benefit of being light for cards like Galaxy Soldier. Special summons himself, but is really bad after you've already built a board. Goblinberg is better once you've built a board because he allows rank 4 plays even when you already have stuff on your side of the field. They're just good in different scenarios, which is why we have a 2-2 split. 3 copies of Raiden, the best Lightsworn ever printed. I don't really need to tell you any more about this card. 3 copies of Wolf. You know, back in the day, summoning Wolf was like enough to win the game on its own. When it was like, summon my Silva, summon your Wolf, that was a point in the game where this card felt fair. But now, a free special summon that allows you to go into a rank 4 is just a little bit enough for us to play 3 of. 1 copy of Aaron. This card is searchable off of Charge the Light Brigade, and that's the reason that we're playing a lot of these Lightsworns as one-ofs. Very good in a deck with Fairy Tale Snow because it can shuffle the thing that they just Book of the Moon. More importantly, it is a 4-star. You can normal summon it. Just good to have as a one-of anyway. Same with Lila. Good stat line. Nice effect because routinely we do find ourselves staring down a lot of back row and trying to push for lethal in one turn. It's actually remarkably easy to do so making sure that the way is clear is really important. 3 copies of the best Lightsworn ever printed, Fairy Tale Snow. Boy, oh boy, this card is great, and you'll see in the games how well it performs. 2 copies of Felis, a card that I always seem to draw. 1 copy of Lumina, a card that I'm glad I don't have to draw anymore because I've knocked it down to 1. And 1 copy of Minerva, just a nice card to run into if you're randomly milling yourself. Also searchable off of Charge of the Light Brigade. Then, as far as spells go, we have 3 Solar Recharge. I'm confident we have enough Lightsworns to support all 3, but I may be overestimating my abilities just a little bit. 2 copies of Instant Fusion to make sure we can go into Nodin as much as possible. 1 Reinforcement of the Army, searches Raiden. 2 copies of Pot of Cupidity. I don't want to play 3 in a 40 card deck, but if you're playing a 50, I understand why you would. 1 copy of Soul Charge allows us to just remake the board that was just blown up. 1 copy of Foolish Burial allows us to send a Wolf in order to extend plays, or a Trick Clown if we didn't get our Brilliant Fusion off. Any number of really good picks for Foolish Burial. 2 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade allows us to search any of our singletons. 3 copies of Brilliant Fusion I went over earlier, and the only trap that matters, Vanity's Emptiness. In the extra, we have our Brilliant Fusion target. Seraphonite's effect is actually remarkably relevant in this deck, despite not being Monarchs. 1 copy of Norden. This is a good card. One copy of Red Dragon, Archfiend, Scarlight, Buster, Blaster. This card is fine. I never find myself wanting to go into it. I almost always want to go into our next card, which is 2 copies of Omega. This card's broken as hell. I love it. 1 copy of Michael Arts, Lightsworn Lord, just a good rank 7-star synchro monster for when we sync with Lumina. A Cyber Dragon Infinity and a Nova, a Utopia the Lightning and a Utopia, Performage Trapeze Magician, just because, and then our rank 4 suite, including the greatest card ever printed, Light Lord, Saint Minerva. Please, God, reprint this. So let's jump into the games and see what happens. So our first match is up against Zombie Synchro, a deck that we all probably should be a little bit afraid of, just because I think it'll be skirting on the edges of playability for at least a little while until something happens to Omega. You'll notice that we've both drawn the best cards in our decks, Gemini Garnet, except, you know, he's playing 2, so he deserves every single bit of this that he gets. We don't really have a very good turn 1. We do have the ability to make Minerva, which is about all I can ask for. So we're going to do that now. Use Raiden to send as much as possible. Use Minerva. We send a wolf off of the Minerva mill, which is great. If we can get one more card in our graveyard that matters, like a Fairy Tale Snow, we could go into a second rank 4, but we don't. Instead, we have a Galaxy Soldier Engrave, which means there's no more Cyber Dragon in this game, and a bunch of spells, basically. In our hand, we have a card that's bad, a card that's bad, and 2 cards that are good enough. So we'll see how this turns out. Our opponent is going to open up by Gold Sarking and hitting Necroface. Now, that's not good for me. Also not very good for him when he hits cards like Performage Trick Clown. Thankfully, we don't see anything that really matters in these 5 that we banish, aside from a couple Raidens. He's going to go ahead and make Iron Chain Dragon, and I'm like, okay, so he's going to continue synchro plays from here. But apparently he's decided that's all he really wants to do, and I don't really know what to say here. Don't send cards off the top of your opponent's deck if they're playing Lightsworn. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me, but I don't know. So he set Twin Twister and Shinrai Sword Slash. This is a card that you always have to be on the lookout for against this deck. Thankfully, this is a dragon, so we're not in any danger of it. So immediately, when it's passed back to me and I'm not dead as Lightsworn, the first thing on my mind is, how can I assemble lethal? And thankfully, I figure out a way. It involves using Feelies to destroy this card, and then finding a way to get Performage Trick Clown in my graveyard. I figure after like a billion mills, I gotta find one. And remember, we only have 5 cards left in our deck, so it would be a travesty if we failed to mill any of our Fairy Tale Snows. So we do hit those. We're going to be able to go into Emerald and use Emerald's effect to get Garnet back, because here's a tricky tip. Did you know Emerald actually has a second effect? Special summons a non-effect monster from your graveyard. So that's perfect for us to go into another rank 4, and then we can use Snow again to summon her in attack mode. Now this is slightly over 8,000 damage. I'm hoping there's no battle traps, but I know this deck really doesn't play traps aside from Swallow Slash and things like Twin Twister, and it turns out that's really all that he has. So for our second match, we're up against Rare Metaphors. For those of you who don't know, Rare Metaphors is basically very similar to Metaphors Magispector, except it has the ability to play their like instant speed fusion, which is pretty good, and they have a Thousand Eyes Restrict in here too, like a tribal one. So I'm feeling okay, but not great. We're going to start off things with the greatest mill in the history of time. Really makes up for the bad mills last game. We're going to go ahead and go into Minerva, and then we have a tuner and a 4-star. So I'm going to go into a Mega. I'm going to do it right now because the way YGO Pro works, I don't want to like screw around with priority. So once Minerva dies, we mill a Trick Clown, and I'm like, well, he uses normal summon, so for all I know, shields are down. He sets Regeki, Twin Twister, Solemn Warning, and has a Rare Metaphos Bismaga face up. So I'm like, okay, well, that card is just asking to be castelled, so I'm going to do that as fast as possible. He's going to destroy my normal summon, and I'm like, fine, fine, fine. I have a Fairy Tale Snow. That's 2,000 life points I don't have to worry about. Let's go ahead and castell that Bismaga. He Twin Twisters it. I'm like, okay, I understand why you're doing that, but I don't agree with it. I get Trick Clown back because the Trick Clown has not ended this turn. It was last turn. And then I can get Snow back by banishing basically every card I control and every card in my hand. But since this is lethal, and I'm pretty sure that this is not a battle trap, I'm willing to do it, and he's going to go ahead and concede. So I've sort of shown you a lot of what happens when the deck goes off, but what happens when it sort of gets stunned out of the game? Well, look no further. This game we're playing up against DD Donkey Kong. We have, not a lot in our hand. 2 copies of Fairy Tale Snow. You don't want to see this in multiples. You really don't want to see this in multiples in your hand. So we don't really have anything to do. We did draw Vanities, so I'm like, well, I can normal summon a Snow and set Vanities. That's, you know, that could maybe be worse. I can't really understand how, but it's possible. He's going to draw 10 billion cards and play DD Savant, and I go, oh god, here we go. He's going to contract himself one of the Pendulum monsters, and I'm not feeling super good. 4 set cards isn't usually the DD board, but we're going to normal summon Raiden, and here comes Solemn Notice number 1. I'm like, alright, well, we do actually have plays. Let's go ahead and Instant Fusion. We can make a rank 4, and oh, well, here comes Solemn Notice number 2. So I'm like, well, he is at 5,000. If we attack in, we get him to like 3150. And then, I don't know, sometime in the future we can start winning the game. I mean, we can make a Michael next turn, maybe. So he's going to go ahead and get Lamina and then do Where Art Thou? And I'm like, oh god, I actually just lose. Going to go ahead and slime his way into a Gale Overlord Alexander, then get these 2 back, and after he does that, he can destroy this Pendulum monster for Abyss Ragnarok, go into Hope Harbinger, go into Crystal Wing, and go into Oracle King Dark. So, you know, classic DDD turn, nothing to worry about. Thankfully, I'm taking half damage this turn. So I'm going to draw, and I realize right off the bat I'm dead. I'm like, I can summon Lumina, I'll use her effect, but oh, here comes Vanity's Emptiness. And a chain of Vanity's Emptiness, I'm like, I guess I can get Snow back, but I don't have enough cards, so I'm going to have to banish everything I control and everything in my hand, and he's just going to Crystal Wing it. So, you know, that's the end of the game. So we're back with the deck. I mean, obviously I was impressed. There's a reason that people expect this deck to be a tier 1 meta threat in the coming format, and it recently had a really good showing at YCS Liverpool. I think it got second to PK Fire, but there's a couple things going against this deck. The first is sideboard hate. Like, the generic sideboard hate against this archetype is incredibly good, and it's incredibly flexible. A lot of people are already packing Kaijus, so if you're all in on this, like, go into Cyber Dragon Infinity plan, you're going to get Kaiju'd a lot just because people are prepared for ABC. And speaking of ABC preparation, cards like Ally of Justice Cycle Reader, which people were already citing for Blue Eyes, assuming that Blue Eyes was going to like remain a power player, will be very good against this strategy, especially if you go all in on the plan of like make as many guys with Trick Clown as possible. It also helps that things like Imperial Iron Wall that Paleozoics are toying around with really shut down Snow a lot of the time. There's just a lot of incidental hatred for this deck that's lurking in the format. As far as individual card choices, the first thing I'd say is don't play 40 cards. You got to be playing 45 or 50. It came up a lot that I would either be close to decking myself or not have enough fuel for Fairy Tale Snow, or accidentally mill a Galaxy Soldier, or Garnet and like have Brilliant Fusions as my next draw. You make sure that your percentages are where they should be. Secondly, I didn't really like Galaxy Soldier, and I'm sure this changes when you play more cards, but a lot of the time I had like a light guy in hand that I didn't want to discard, or I had like the second one in Graveyard, so I couldn't even do anything with the Galaxy Soldier anyway. I was unimpressed with it, but I'm sure that changes if you're a better deck builder than I am. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed my in-depth explanation of MINERVA LIGHTSWORNs. I hope you enjoyed me talking about the deck that really won't show up in any large numbers until Minerva gets reprinted, and most of all, I hope you just enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give me a like, a comment, or a subscribe. It really helps me out, and if you want to see me play the decks that I make on this show on stream, I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday from 9:30 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time. Links are in the description. Finally, if you want to see a certain deck or archetype played on a future episode of this show, let me know in the comments below, and I will do my best to accommodate you. Otherwise, I will see you on Wednesday.